And that means more institutional buyers are able to acquire this instrument in a regulated form.
Today, we welcome back Andrew Forson. He is in a different role today, but that role brings with it a lot of excitement for the Hedera space. Andrew, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Pleasure to be here and a pleasure to talk about Hedera, one of our favorite L1 chains.
There we go. So, Andrew, you recently made this jump from THA to Valor, who also does a lot with Hedera. Can you tell us about Valor and how it supports the Hedera ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Valor is the wholly owned subsidiary of the NASDAQ listed company DeFi Technologies. And DeFi Technologies are listed on the NASDAQ. We're a Canadian headquartered company with a ticker symbol of DEFT. And as Valor is a wholly owned subsidiary, our focus is on the creation and issuance of exchange traded products. Now, Valor has been founded, it was founded by Johan Wattenstrom and Olivier Rusty Newton. And the reason why I bring this up is that pedigree is pretty important. For instance, back in May 2015, our co-founder Johan Wattenstrom created the world's first Bitcoin ETF. So think of that. We're talking literally a decade ago.
Number one. Amazing.
And then the other individual co-founder, our CEO, Olivier Rusty Newton, was the one who created the first Bitcoin publicly listed Bitcoin mining company. So that was called Hive, and it actually still exists today, I believe. It's still listed and still trading. So the pedigree in the digital asset space is long. Valour, however, is focused on the listing of ETPs predominantly in Europe. Johan Wattenstrom is from Sweden. So that is one of our, I'll call it our natural operating bases. But increasingly, we are expanding not only more broadly within Europe and growing market share within Europe, but we're certainly also expanding internationally as some of the press releases have brought on. I'm happy to serve as president of DeFi Technologies and the chief growth officer of Valour.
Exciting stuff. Now, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing with Hedera?
As you know, it is hard to have been a part of the Hedera ecosystem or worked with HBAR and Hedera and not fall in love with the technology, not fall in love with the ecosystem. Indeed, Valour, I think over a year ago, was the first in the world to create an HBAR ETP. And that was launched on the Deutsche Börse Frankfurt. And then we had subsequent launches. I think back in December, we actually listed on Paris Euronext. So we have a long history of having the ETPs being listed and working with the Hedera community. Additionally, we have, and I know this was announced, but we have signed a project to be co-owners and co-operators with the Nairobi Securities Exchange for something called the Kenya Digital Exchange. And this is rapidly in development. It's actually quite advanced. And in that regards, the idea here is the Kenya Digital Exchange will provide tokenization, primary market, distribution, a degree of custody, and secondary market exchange of tokenized and digital assets. And it will cover the full gamut of funds, equities, commodities, and debt. So it's a comprehensive solution. And of course, with Nairobi Securities Exchange being, I guess it's now the Hedera Council, but a Hedera Governing Council member, you can bet that we're having good discussions on Hedera integration so that these assets will be leveraging the Hedera DLT.
Yeah, thanks to you, Andrew. I covered that a few weeks ago. I've said this several times in the past, but I always thought that we would see this progression starting with things like DeFi and NFT exchanges, and that was going to lead to more traditional exchanges. And we saw that with Hedera, with Verto and the digital commodities exchange. And then the next thing on my list was to see more developed securities exchanges and stock exchanges next on the list. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the Nairobi Securities Exchange and the Kenya Digital Exchange. So, the next thing is they're going to be a proof of concept, just like those other things were proofs of concept for the Nairobi Securities Exchange. The Nairobi Securities Exchange and the Kenya Digital Exchange will serve as a proof of concept for all of the other exchanges out there, because I think this is how things are going to move. But I do want to get back to your ETP or ETF. And when I first saw that ETP hit the market, I checked a few months after it launched, and the assets under management wasn't necessarily impressive at that point. And I've seen a significant uptick since then. Now, it's not massive. Now I think it's a little over $3 million worth. But what do you attribute that growth to, and how do we keep that growth going?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. So right now, I think there is on the Valor Hedera, there's about 2.9 million in assets under management. We have three such products, but then we also have the Valor Hedera in the SEK, in the Swedish kroner, and that has 6.5 million in assets under management. And then we have the one Valor Hedera physical staking. And that one, I'm not exactly sure the assets under management right now, but certainly it's considerable. I mean, it's over, it's in the millions in that regards. So what I attribute that growth in is, in particular, DeFi technologies. The name DeFi is because they focus on decentralized finance, but they really, really are effective at working the bridge between digital assets, decentralized finance, and traditional capital markets. So, what I find in this space, in particular, when the Valour DeFi technologies people, when our team creates these products, we're not creating them to satisfy the Web3 digital asset space exclusively. The counterparties that DeFi Technologies is dealing with are traditional capital markets players that are seeking regulated, safe exposure to the digital asset space. Why is this distinction important? This distinction is important because whenever we wrap a Hedera HBAR digital asset into the ETP and list it on an exchange, that automatically becomes consumable by a type of retail consumer that may be too intimidated or may not have the technical know-how to download, install a wallet, establish keys, and then hold the token. That's one. On the second part, you have the complication of many corporate treasuries are actually not even permitted or regulated either by internal constitution or by regulation to hold digital assets. By wrapping it into an ETP, we render it into something that trades more or less like stocks on a traditional stock exchange. And that means more institutional buyers are able to acquire this instrument in a regulated form. So that's at a base level the benefit of the process, which all the ETP providers provide. At a specific level, we have several business units within our operating framework that actually create products and have an entire vertical integration that accelerates capital from private capital markets and allowing them to better enter the digital asset space. So whenever we appear on the scene with a product, it is rare that it is just an ETP. It is normally the creation of an ETP alongside a range of potential other solutions or opportunities that the foundations could take advantage of. And that's one of the unique value propositions of the DeFi technologies Valour access.
I think this is exactly what we want to hear. I'm starting to develop this theory that, of course, Bitcoin has seen, outperformance over the past year because of those ETFs. But now, as we bring access to these other assets, I think that, we're going to start to see that alt season. I know you probably can't talk too much about that, but I think that could be a driver for some of these digital assets that support other ecosystems. But I asked this of Duncan last week. How do you think ETFs and ETPs are going to impact the crypto space broadly and Hedera more specifically?
Yeah, well, for one, I think that that's actually an excellent question. I think the first thing is it brings liquidity. Anytime you are able to introduce a new class of buyer to an asset class that has otherwise been considered risk on, for instance, I mean, that's the truth about digital assets. Institutional buyers have been more reluctant to get into it because it has certain requirements vis-a-vis technological infrastructure and custodianship. So if we make it easy for institutions and retail buyers to explore taking a position in these instruments, that's good. It brings more capital into the space. And with more capital into the space, normally that tends to have innovation follow on. And one thing that we've noted, in particular with Valour, since inception, Valour has never had a month of capital outflows. So if you think of that, whenever markets are going up, that means there are capital inflows. But even when there have been bear markets, and I really think this is a tribute to our wonderful marketing team, Johanna, who is in Sweden, of course, Johan, who's a genius, Olivier, and the team. But even in bear markets, the target of our sales and marketing efforts, they're the type that tend to be long-standing and still invest in markets where things are going down. So whenever you do that, that brings a degree of stability to HBAR, that brings a lot of capital into the market. I think the other thing is whenever you have institutional adoption to the point that investment banks, brokerages, and dealers are now able to take a position in an ETP, it means that the digital asset has arrived and you can start to build more instruments, build more and larger reliable frameworks on that platform. It's very hard to do that if nobody can access it. But if we now have access from the traditional digital asset space, in addition to the capital market space, that's sort of a bit of security to people who want to build big systems and leverage HBAR.
Well, there was a lot of what you just said that stuck out to me, but I'm really impressed that you said that the first ETF, Bitcoin ETF, was launched 10 years ago. So that means you've gone through three bear markets in the interim, and you've only had inflows during that time. We've had drops, from Bitcoin to 20,000 all the way to 3,500. We had Bitcoin going from 70,000 all the way to 14,000. And during that entire time, you've only had inflows. So your team is doing something right. There's no question about that. So in addition,
the one thing I want to clarify, that first Bitcoin ETF that Johan made in March 2015, it was with his first company, which he eventually sold. And then they launched Valour, I think, in around 2018 or 2019.
Okay.
So since Valour, they have not had any net outflows on a monthly basis.
Still, I mean, it's still impressive regardless. But, you're doing this stuff with the ETPs. I can't overstate how important what you're doing with the Nairobi Securities Exchanges, with the Kenyan Digital Exchange. Is there anything else that Valour is working on that we should know about?
This is where it's tricky. Now I'm the president of a public company. So I can unequivocally say yes, but I'm probably unable to announce. But look, Brendan, I can tell you that the moment I am able to announce, you will be tied with the first to know.
Well, I appreciate it, Andrew. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
Yeah, I would like to say that there's a lot of growth in the digital asset space, and we look at it from a different perspective than foundations. For instance, our objective isn't necessarily to just grow adoption. Our objective is to actually create instruments that will be evergreen, revenue generating, profit generating, and will attract further capital into the ecosystem. And so, in this way, we really provide a unique sort of partnership to foundations because we also bring liquidity into the foundation. I mean, whenever we're launching these instruments, it makes it easier for the foundations to do what they need to do. And you can certainly expect, I think right now we have over 65 ETPs launched. And by the end of this year, we will have over 100. And many of those will start to include certain baskets or index products. And you can rest assured that as HBAR continues to gain increased traction and adoption, it will not only be included in its single asset form, but it'll also be included in certain sort of derivative packages and index packages that will also be of interest to investors, we're certain.
And that's exactly what we want to hear. Andrew, we appreciate you coming on here today and giving us your insights, and I can't wait to have you back on some of these future developments.
Hey, Brendan, you are the best. I've said it before. You're the best. You're wonderful for the community and ecosystem. And anytime you say there's an opportunity, I'm here.
I'm now posting these interviews of Hedera builders independently to my channel. The community, influencers, and media outlets are free to use this content to spread the word on what's being built on Hedera. Once they're all uploaded, you'll be able to go to my channel and search for whatever topic or team you're interested in to find more information. Or you'll be able to get the most recent Hedera news by watching the latest HBAR Weekly update. So check them out.